For my first playthrough of Like A Dragon Gaiden, I told myself that I will do a challenge run, just to make the game a bit more difficult, so I decided to ban healing items in the run. I'm also going to be playing the game on the highest difficulty, which is professional. I'm writing the script as I go along with the challenge, so I don't know how this will go. Let me know in the comments if you think I can win this or not, or which parts you think I'll struggle with the most. I feel like I should mention there will be slight spoilers for the run, so if you plan on playing the game yourself, then here's your warning. I say that, but by the time I actually finish editing this video, Infinite Wolf will probably already be out. Anyway, let's just get right into it. Let's skip all the tutorial fights because, well, they're the tutorial. The first true fight we have is against a few yakuza in this area office in an Ijincho. Although they are just regular goons, I do get thrashed around a little bit because I'm not too used to the combat. I took care of most of them using a combo and dodging and getting another combo in. I did lose a good chunks of health though, thanks to the guy with the gun. I should have taken care of him earlier. The second fight was at a parking lot, and thankfully our health was set to full. I would combo the enemy and use a string shot whenever possible, hitting multiple enemies into each other, and although it wasn't going too well, since Joryu just kept trying to grab stuff. The enemies with stun guns and baseball bats also did a lot of damage. I found a wooden katana on the ground which I used, but it broke early because it got hit by a stun gun and dropped it. The iron pipe also did a good amount of damage. I think for this run, weapons will be quite important, at least until I am able to get more upgrades. I was a bit under half health after the first phase, which didn't make me feel good when we had to fight our first mini-boss. I kept dodging and landing 1 or 2 hits in and just repeating the process. This game introduces us to counters, which you can then use as an enemy charging up their special attack. For our first try, this boss actually went well, and I can't believe that I was able to get away with so little health. Okay, so on the second attempt of this boss fight, the game healed me to full health instead of leaving me with the amount of health I had before starting this fight for the first time. Right afterwards, we have a fight with a man in a Hanya mask. This fight is more the same thing, get a hit in, dodge and repeat. During this fight, I did manage to upgrade my attack power, just to finish this fight that little bit quicker. Towards the middle of this fight, I did drop with the ball a little bit, going from full health to less than half, eventually defeating him while in red health. But then, it's revealed that this boss has a second phase. And this is where we get introduced to our second fighting stance, the Yakuza. The first fighting stance, known as the Agent, is intended to be used in a more methodical way, where you can use a string to either stop enemies from moving or attacking for a while, or you can just sling them around to do more damage. The Yakuza fighting stance is similar to the other styles from the previous games. Despite my low health, I was able to bring this boss to half health. I went back to the menu to upgrade my health, just to have that little bit more room for error. I used charge up attacks that can only be used while in the Yakuza fighting mode to do a bit more damage. I also grabbed the cone to do a heat action, and then finished him off with one last combo. I somehow did not get hit at the end there, which was really lucky. Hanawa, a member of that doji faction and Joryu's manager, gets captured by the 2 bosses we just fought. After the fight, the local homeless camp takes Joryu and tends to his wounds, which is the very same homeless camp that Ichiban was in at the start of Like A Dragon. I know that this game takes place between Yakuza 6 and Like A Dragon, but I honestly didn't expect this kind of fan service, and I'm loving it. Other members of the Daidoji faction eventually appear and take us back to their base. Joryu pleads with him to go back and rescue Hanawa, but they want to leave him to die, so we break their rules and storm out of their base, fighting tons of enemies along the way. The first set of goons, it wasn't too bad, but when I stepped outside there were tons of enemies. I tried using the string to throw them around, but since I'm not familiar with this game, I couldn't really throw the enemies the way I wanted to. Picking up the drop weapons was a good call though, and it helped a lot with finishing this fight. Then I had the pleasure of meeting an agent with a laser gun disguised as an umbrella, who took me down to critical health by the time I knocked him out. Then the next enemy I came across destroyed me. Thankfully though, this game respawned me right before that encounter, with full health this time. I was able to beat Mushin on the second try, but he took way too much health for my liking. But I somehow was able to beat the next agent despite my low health. Agent Anzen throws caltrops and knives at you, which make it very difficult to run away from him. The caltrops would also stop you from moving if you were even close to them. Thankfully, I had a baton with me and I used a heat action against him, which trapped him in a corner and I was able to take him out easily. Agent Saigo, the agent without a space in their name, shoots laser beams at you. He quickly knocked me out, but like last time, I was thankfully respawned right before this fight and with full health to boot, which let me tank a few of his laser beams. I would charge up my heavy attacks with the Yakuza style for the most damage, then use weapons for heat actions whenever my heat gauge was full. Despite the heavy beating I took at the start, I was able to beat him on my second try. The last obstacle from leaving the Daidoji office was a group of agents along with Yoshimura. The small fry enemies gang up on you and Yoshimura shoots you with his shotgun. I tried to make the best out of the string shot, either knocking down a bunch of enemies at once or stopping them from moving. With only Yoshimura left, I picked up the drop weapon and started to use heat actions to bring his health down. I tried to block his gunshots with a police baton, but it didn't really work out for me. I chased him down to get the last few hits in. He nearly got me in the end with his consecutive shots, but I managed to pull through in the end. We meet up with Tsuruno, one of the people who kidnapped Hanawa. After a bit of chit chat and negotiations for his life, he gives a red tiger keychain to Kiryu and tells him to go to Sotenbori, ending the first chapter. We are told to look for a person named Akame in Sotenbori, But before I started looking for her, I decided to go to the karaoke bar and got a perfect score for Bakamitai. After a few fights with some local street thugs, we finally get to meet Akane, a jack of all trades that's supposed to take us to a place called the castle, with the key being the red tiger we got from Tsuruno. Before she takes us over though, Akane makes Jori do some of her work, specifically dealing with yakuza and helping the homeless. People in the Omi family have been committing welfare fraud by kidnapping the homeless and forcing them to live in a small room. The fight is only against regular enemies, with a single large one as well, but I ended up dying here once since I went into this fight with only half of my health. Despite helping Akane, she still won't take us to the castle, and assigns us to expand the Akane network, which we can do by helping out people around Sotenbori, whether it's by helping them grab items from trees, feeding them, or beating up people, or even just giving them toilet paper. You can also level up the Akane network by doing sub-stories, which I will definitely do later on in the run. You also get Akane points for completing these tasks, which is needed to upgrade your abilities, along with money. We also get sent to a weaponsmith, who also gives us a new gadget for the agent style, drones. We can send a flock of drones to enemies to damage and stop enemies from coming towards us. With our new drone weapon, we finally get to the castle, where Joryu is forced to fight in the Colosseum. But in order to protect his identity from being found out by Nishitani III, he has to put on a mask. The theme for tonight's battles is a blast from the past, where the participants recreate historic events, which of course includes Kiryu's fights as well. The first fight of the three is against an impersonator of Watase. This is a straightforward one-on-one fight. I would try to dodge his nailed baseball bat and go in for a charge combo whenever I could. I did over-rely on the charge combos a little bit too much though, since by the time I took him down I was already at critical health. And with this being the first battle, I didn't really feel too good about the other two. The second fight was against a fake Kiryu, who was reenacting the final chapter from the first Yakuza game. Unfortunately, this isn't a one-on-one like last time. We have a few allies on our side against him. While that sounds like a good thing on paper, it really isn't, because the NPCs will just get in front of you and they would just block your attacks from hitting the boss. They can also punch him away from your combos too. Fake Kiryu has a gun and sword, making his range a lot further than mine. I have no choice but to stay close to him. This was the first roadblock I had in this run, with me dying 21 times in this fight alone. And the only reason I won was because I got lucky with the heat action, and with the strong attacks coming from him, which you can just counter by dodging and pressing the B button. The third fight was even worse for me. This time we dress up as Kiryu, and we are put up against an Ryuji Goda impersonator, this time depicting the finale from Yakuza 2. At first, it was a simple one-on-one, and the first phase was just straightforward. But the entire time I had a feeling that this fight would become much more difficult, and well, I was right. For the second phase of this fight, the game pulls a fast one on you, dropping you from the cage down into a pit, where you're forced to fight against two tigers. When dropping down, Kiryu picks up a sword automatically. I tried stabbing the tigers with heavy attacks, but after a few hits they would just mow me down. The tiger's hitbox is also a bit confusing. The only way to damage him is to either hit him in the head or hit him from the back. Coupled in with their erratic attack patterns, this was just a recipe for disaster. I kept trying and trying for ages. I decided to just cheese it by switching to the agent style and ran around in circles for 10 minutes or so, letting the drones chip away at their health. The third phase was another fight against the Ryuji imposter. I wasn't able to get a good rhythm in this fight. After each combo I did, he was able to counter me, and I died to a bit eventually. On the next attempt, I then proceeded to do the same thing I did with the tigers, and I just ran around in a circle for about 10 minutes, spawning drones and running away from Ryuji Goda. Ryuji would just get stuck on the tigers' bodies when trying to run towards me, which allowed the drones to easily swarm him. After beating Goda, I have a choice here. Either I can go back into the Colosseum and grind for a little bit more so I can buy better abilities, or I can go back to Sotenbori to finally save Hanawa from the Omi clan. I think that the rescue mission is going to be much easier, since it's probably just going to be a bunch of typical enemies with a boss at the end. I'm going to try it. If it's too difficult, I can always just go back to an older save and grind out the Colosseum. This set piece is structured as a mini boss rush of sorts, with a few normal enemies to fight in between. I made sure to pick up a bat after the first wave since weapons in this game are quite overpowered, only for the first mini boss to knock it out of my hands instantly. I tanked Sakuma's hits while charging up my Yakuza attacks. I beat him on my first try but my health was really low. I upgraded my health stats right after, but it didn't really give me a lot of HP. But hey, every little helps. I died from the next set of normal enemies, but thankfully, the game healed me to full and placed me after beating the mini-boss. The checkpoints in this game are very generous. For Yao, the second mini-boss, I was able to juggle him in the air for the first third of his health bar, and then took him down to his last health bar with a counter and hit action. I should worry about my health more, and not be as careless as reckless as I am, but with how nice these checkpoints are, I find it difficult to do it otherwise. I had a lot more trouble with Kubota, the third mini-boss. The first attempt with full health actually went fairly well, until I somehow got on top of his head. It got me a bit annoyed, which made me mess up this fight a lot more than I should have. With all the furniture in this room though, I made sure to use heat actions as much as I could, which is what let me win this fight. And yes, I survived with basically zero health. Ukita, the fourth mini-boss, was a total pushover. I got him trapped into a corner thanks to a nice juggle. I countered, then used a heat action, and the rest is history. In the next room I found a green bracelet, an item which boosts my defense and prevents bleeding, which is something that will definitely be useful for the run. Now, time for the main boss, Tsuruno. He goes balls out, instantly attacking you when the fight starts. His iron and hacksaw combo is also quite menacing. While it doesn't do too much damage by itself, the combos with it do. And with its far reach and the potential to make you bleed health, it's something that's difficult to deal with in such a small area. Coupled in with a few small enemies, it's hard to dodge and charge up attacks without getting tossed around like a salad by these goons. After a few poor attempts, I caved in and switched to agent style and proceeded to run around in a circle for 10 minutes, relying on the drones to take him out. In his second phase, Tsuruno loses his hacksaw, so avoiding him was also a lot easier. After the mist that was the Coliseum in Hanawa, I went on a bit of a grind around Sotenbori, since the game wouldn't let me go back to the castle to grind out some earlier Coliseum challenges. I found a few platinum and gold plates and sold them for some cash. When I tried returning to the Coliseum, the game kept telling me about having to face this mighty opponent called Hammerhead. With all these extra cutscenes building him up, talking about how this will be my most difficult fight yet, and how he could easily kill me. I actually started to get really worried, and I destroyed him. After having such a traumatizing second chapter, I was genuinely scared for this fight before it even happened. The whiplash I feel here is just insane to say the least. I'm going to do a Coliseum fight to see how much money I can actually get, and turns out I get about 250,000 yen. After a few of these fights, I'll be able to upgrade my stats by a lot. I ended up grinding for just under an hour, getting a bunch of general upgrades, along with some new heat actions. I also went out on my way to get the Tiger Drop, which is 3 million yen. Tiger Drops are really overpowered in the older PS3 games like Yakuza 5 and 0, but I've never really mastered the Tiger Drop in the Dragon engine. Hopefully it'll be worth it. I also bought some new gear at the boutique just to buff up my defense a little bit and get some resistance to fighting conditions like preventing bleeding and getting stunned. I wanted to test out Tiger Drop, so I went to Sotenbori and fought against some regular enemies, and wow, Tiger Drop was very underwhelming. I couldn't even one-hit KO a regular enemy. Because I plan on 100% in this game, I decided to do a few sub-stories just to get closer to the completion, and besides, the extra money and economy points will definitely come in handy later on. After all of that, the Daidoji faction calls us to go into their base in Sotenbori, where the script has flipped and now Hanawa is torturing Tsuruno, albeit not too cruelly. Joryu frees Tsuruno, which naturally results in another fight against the Daidoji faction. I ate a few bullets from Yoshimura at the start, but apart from that, I had an easy time, taking care of the small fry with the Yakuza style, and sending them flying into the air and juggling. Hanawa threw a stun grenade at me, which let the remaining enemies hit me for a bit of damage, but very quickly it was only Hanawa and Yoshimura remaining. I tried to chase Yoshimura since he was the one with a gun, but he's quick on his feet, and has a really good shot too, considering he hit me behind the shelf here. The second attempt, I followed the same strategy of taking out the goons first, but this time I made sure to stick closer to Yoshimura so that he wouldn't shoot. By the end, it was only Hanawa and I left. Thankfully, there was a weapon nearby, so I used that for a heat action, and then Hanawa got into his second phase. I parried him, used a heat action, and then juggled him in the air until he was done. Before starting the castle set piece, I went to do a few more sub-stories, and with the money I made, I upgraded a few stats, and I also went to the boutique inside the castle to buy some extra gear to increase my defense and resistances. And with that, I'm ready to raid the castle. For the enemies by the pool, I just used the Yakuza style, charging up my attacks whenever I could. The next few sets of enemies are quite easy, and they would only attack in small groups. Kiryu does some Spider-Man maneuvers and drops down to the bottom of the ship. I have no clue how Kiryu doesn't hurt himself while flying. Anyway, I got taken out almost instantly in the basement, but as expected, the game spawned me right back to where I was at basically. I mentioned it before, but it feels a bit cheap since the game respawns me with full health if I die, and RGG Studios have been very generous with their checkpoints, which just allows me to play recklessly as I am now. At first I thought that maybe the game had set me to a lower difficulty, but no, I'm still in professional mode. After shimmying around the ship, I walked into two tougher enemies and then continued to shimmy onwards. I picked up a military bulletproof vest on the way, but unfortunately I won't be using it since I bought a different vest right before the set piece. Eventually I make it to the prison chamber of the castle. This is where I use the jetpack shoes for the first time, and it's so much fun running over these enemies, and it builds up a lot of heat as well, which is something that I can definitely use in the run later on. The rest of the enemies were more of the same, so I'll skip to the end where we get to fight Nishitani III for the first time. At first, I found Nishitani hard to avoid because of how fast he moves, but after a few quick deaths, I grasped his attack patterns and tried to get a few light attacks in before dodging his own. Unfortunately though, his combos have a far reach, and if I didn't time my evasions perfectly, then I would just get caught, getting combo locked in the process. One mistake and I can easily lose half of my health. On my 8th attempt of this fight, I got into the second phase for the first time, but quickly died because of my low health. I got into the second phase a few more times afterwards, but each time my health was just too low and I would get caught out eventually. At first, I used heat actions in the first phase, but then I decided that I would save them for the second one instead. After finishing the quick time event, which by the way the prompt will always be A, and parrying his heat action, I'll grab some furniture, hit him once or twice, and then go for a heat action. And because I saved my heat, I can do another one with a different piece of furniture, which was enough to knock him out. I essentially beat Nishitani's second phase without getting hit once. This fight took me 18 tries overall. After the fight against Nishitani, he leaves the castle and goes into hiding. To try to catch his attention, Kiryu tells Tsuruno to meet up with him and to bring 30 million yen. And what do they do with that money exactly? They go party. Shishido and some of his underclassmen join the party as well. Shishido and Tsuruno challenge you to a game of golf and pool respectively, and you get a total of 600,000 yen for beating them in their games. It's not a lot of money, but it's enough for me to upgrade my heat gauge. After partying, I went through a few more sub-stories and upgraded my stats some more, and then I went back to the castle. This time with the intent to take it over and become the new king. This set piece wasn't anything too special, just a few tanky enemies to take care of. Nishitani finally comes out of hiding and tells us to meet up with him at the golf resort. And well, Nishitani didn't show up, but instead he sent a group of yakuza to beat Kiryu up. Shishido comes in clutch and we team up to take care of his mob. There were 3 or 4 enemies with shotguns, which made this fight a lot more difficult. I started off this fight by grabbing the person on the left with the slingshot, and then yeeting him away into a crowd of enemies to hopefully knock them down. I then try to find the remaining enemies with guns and take them out as quickly as possible, while avoiding attacks from the other yakuza. I stayed in agent mode for this fight because you can chain multiple dodges, which not only helps with evading upcoming attacks, but when I hear someone prepare a shotgun, I can just dodge whenever they start to shoot. The strange thing about this game is that the enemies can hit you while you're flying around with the rocket boots, but they'll completely miss you if you just do a quick step. After taking out the enemies with guns, I switched to the Yakuza style and tried to juggle a few of the remaining ones, with varying success. The Omi warehouse set piece itself wasn't anything interesting. There were no mini bosses of the sort, just a bunch of regular enemies throughout the building. Shishido was on my side though, which I thought would make things a little bit easier, but it felt like he was just hitting me more than the enemies. I'm surprised that I was able to survive one of the rooms with essentially 0 health. This was the most interesting part of the set piece for me. But, as expected with this game, when I did eventually get knocked out, it just put me in the same room I was in. The second fight against Nishitani was more of the same, but he just had more health this time. I nearly beat this boss without getting hit once, besides a little hiccup at the start, and with the fact that I choked tremendously while he was on his last health bar, but we don't really talk about that. Before going to the final fights of the chapter, I decided to do some grinding so I can upgrade my health and attack stats to level 7, which still proved to not be enough for this chapter. The construction site fight was okay at first, but I would lose too much health before getting to the Nishitani fight, and I would die against him. Even if I made it out of this section, I would have too little health and just end up dying towards the end anyway. I actually had an attempt where Shishido was one hit away, but I flubbed it and I ended up dying. With it being 1 AM when attempting this, I just threw in the towel and reloaded the previous save. I also upgraded my health and attack to level 8 before attempting these fights again. And on the second day, these fights went much better. I was able to avoid most of the attacks in the first phase by cheesing it with the shoes. The stun grenade from Nishitani would, well, stun me, and I'll get hit once or twice, but it wasn't too bad. The first fight for the Omi and Tojo announcement wasn't anything too special, with it just being a bunch of regular enemies. Like with the fight against Ishido and Nishitani in the construction site, I died against the last enemy, with them only being a few hits away. The fight at the entrance was a bit scary because of the guys with shotguns, but that's easily solved thanks to the string shot. And after that fight, we have the final boss fight against Ishido. This is one of the best Yakuza boss fights I've ever played. His super fast slash felt really unfair at first, and I would die in the first phase quite frequently. But I eventually got used to it and I was able to get through the first phase only getting hit once. In the second phase, he would drop his sword and go into fisting mode. His attacks were quite predictable and avoidable for the most part, and his long wind-up times between some of his heavy hitting attacks let me get a heavy combo of my own on him. It was a bit hard to get used to his patterns at first, but it was nothing too major. The third phase was a bit of a choke point for me. He goes back to the moveset from the first phase, but thanks to the furniture in the room, I'm able to get 4 hit actions in. A few more full combos and we're on to the last phase, where we fight on the small roof balcony thing. He is using the same moveset as the one in the second phase, but thanks to a lucky parry and some heat actions, I beat Shishido, and I have beaten Like A Dragon Gaiden without using any healing items. Thanks for watching.